Pride, by J.C. Philpot, from his Reviews, 1853. I hate pride and arrogance. Proverbs 8, verse 13. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. Proverbs 16, verse 5. Of all the sins, pride seems most deeply embedded in the very heart of man. Unbelief, sensuality, covetous, rebellion, presumption, contempt of God's holy will and word, hatred and enmity against the saints of the Most High, deceit and falsehood, cruelty and wrath, violence and murder, these and a forest of other sins have indeed struck deep roots into the black and noxious soil of our fallen nature, and interlacing their lofty stems and gigantic arms, have wholly shut out the light of heaven from man's benighted soul. But these and their associate evils do not seem so thoroughly interwoven into the very constitution of the human heart, nor so to be its very lifeblood, as pride. The lust of the flesh is strong, but there are respites from its workings. Unbelief is powerful, but there are times when it seems to lie dormant. Covetousness is ensnaring, but there is not always a bargain to be made, or an advantage to be clutched. These sins differ also in strength in different individuals. Some seem not much tempted with the grosser passions of our fallen nature. Others are naturally liberal and benevolent, and whatever other idol they may serve, they bend not their knee to the golden calf. Strong natural conscientiousness preserves many from those debasing sins which draw down general reprehension, and a quiet, gentle, peaceable disposition renders others strangers not only to the violent outbreaks, but even to the inward gusts of temper and anger. But where lust may have no power, covetousness no dominion, and anger no sway, there, down in the inmost depths, heaving and boiling like the lava in a crater of a volcano, works that master sin, that sin of sins, pride. As Rome calls herself the mother and mistress of all the churches, so is pride the mother and mistress of all the sins. For where she does not conceive them in her ever-teeming womb, she instigates their movements and compels them to pay tribute to her glory. The origin of evil is hidden from our eyes. Whence it sprang, and why God allowed it to arise in his fair creation, are mysteries which we cannot fathom. But thus much is revealed, that of this mighty fire which has filled hell with sulphurous flame and will one day involve earth and its inhabitants in the general conflagration, the first spark was pride. It is therefore emphatically the devil's own sin. We will not say his darling sin, for it is his torment, the serpent which is always biting him, the fire which is ever consuming him. But it is the sin which hurled him from heaven and transformed him from a bright and holy seraph into a foul and hideous demon. How subtle, then, and potent must that poison be, which could in a moment change an angel into a devil! How black in nature, how concentrated in virulence that venom, one drop of which could utterly deface the image of God in myriads of bright spirits before the throne, and degrade them into monsters of uncleanness and malignity. Be it, then, borne in the mind that the same identical sin which wrought such fearful effects in the courts of heaven was introduced by the tempter into paradise. You shall be as gods, was the lying declaration of the father of lies. When that declaration was believed, and an entrance thus made into Eve's heart, through that gap rushed in pride, lust, and sinful ambition. The fruit of the forbidden tree was pleasant to the eyes. There was food for lust. It was a tree to be desired to make them wise. There was a bait for pride. They would be as gods. There was a temptation to sinful ambition. The woman tempted the man, as the serpent had tempted the woman, and thus by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. And so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. There are sins which men commit that devils cannot. Unbelief, infidelity, and atheism are not sins of devils, for they believe and tremble, and feel too much of the wrath of God to doubt his threatenings or deny his existence. The love of money is a sin from which they are exempt, for gold and silver are confined to earth, and the men who live on it. The lusts of the flesh, in all their bearings, whether gluttony, drunkenness, or sensuality, belong only to those who inhabit tabernacles of clay. But pride, malignity, falsehood, enmity, murder, deceitfulness, and all those sins of which spirits are capable, in these crimes devils as much exceed men as an angelic nature exceeds in depth, power, and capacity of a human one. The eye of man sees for the most part only the grosser offenses against morality. It takes little or no cognizance of internal sins. Thus a man may be admired as a pattern of consistency, because free from the outbreaks of fleshly and more human sins, while his heart, as open to God's heart-searching eye, may be full of pride, malignity, enmity, and murder, the sins of devils. Such were the scribes and Pharisees of old, models of correctness outwardly, but fiends of malice inwardly. So fearful were these holy beings of outward defilement that they would not enter into Pilate's judgment hall, when at the same moment their hearts were plotting the greatest crime that earth ever witnessed, the crucifixion of the Son of God. All sin must, from its very nature, be unspeakably hateful to the Holy One of Israel. It not only affronts his divine majesty, and is high treason against his authority and glory, but it is abhorrent to his intrinsic purity and holiness. It is indeed most difficult for us to gain a spiritual conception of the foul nature of sin as viewed by a holy Jehovah. But there are, perhaps, times and seasons when, to a certain extent, we may realize a faint idea of it. It is when we are favored with the presence of God, see light in his light, and have the mind of Christ. Then, how do we feel towards our base backslidings and filthy lusts? With what eyes does the new man of grace then view his sinful yokefellow, that base old man, that body of sin and death, that carnal mind in which dwells no good thing, that heaving, reeking mass of all pollution and abomination, which he is compelled to carry about with him while life lasts? He views it, how can he but view it, except with loathing and abhorrence? But what is this? For the most part, short and transient, and, in its very nature, weak abhorrence of evil, compared with the enduring and infinite hatred of God against sin, though it may aid us in obtaining a dim and faint conception of it. But among all the evils which lie naked and open before the eyes of him with whom we have to do, pride seems especially to incur his holy abhorrence, and the outward manifestations of it have perhaps drawn down as much as, or more than, any other sin, his marked thunderbolts. His unalterable determination against it, and his fixed resolve to bring down to the dust every manifestation of it, is nowhere so pointedly or so fully declared as in that striking portion of Holy Writ which forms the second chapter of the prophecies of Isaiah.